Most dads think about the kind of father they want to be, but almost none of them think about the kind of father they were already becoming. Long before their child arrived, and the science behind this is genuinely surprising, because it turns out your dad is still shaping how you parent right now in ways most men never fully realize. In this video, you're going to learn the facts behind how your own father got inside your parenting, not just emotionally, but biologically, neurologically, and behaviorally. There's a lot of content out there telling men to break the cycle or to be better than your dad, and some of that is useful, but it skips the part where you actually understand what's happening and why. We're going to fix that today, and I want to start with a finding that is the most underrated piece of parenting research out there, because it completely reframes how we think about this. Researchers at the University of Cambridge gave first-time fathers an interview during their partner's third trimester before the baby was even born. The interview was simple on the surface. It just asked men to narrate their own childhood, specifically their relationship with their own father, and based purely on how a man talked about that relationship, researchers could accurately predict how warm, controlling, or attuned he would be with his baby 8 months later. He hadn't even met his child yet. But the way you describe your dad today isn't just a story you tell, it turns out it's a forecast. That's a remarkable finding on its own, but it's even more remarkable when you understand why it works that way. Not just because what the researchers were really measuring wasn't the facts of your childhood, it was whether you'd made sense of it. Men who could talk about their fathers clearly, both acknowledging the light stuff and the hard stuff, without being dismissive of it or getting overly swamped by it, those men showed up as more present and sensitive parents. Whereas men who couldn't do that, either because they'd shut the whole thing down or because they were still too tangled up in it, those men showed up differently with their kids. And again, this is before the baby was even born. Your parenting style was already measurable at that point. But here's where it gets even stranger. The influence of your father doesn't just start in your childhood. For some men, it starts before they were even born. A body of research on epigenetics, which is the study of how experiences can change how genes are expressed and whether those genes and changes can be passed down, had some of the most striking findings on the children of war survivors. Researchers found that paternal PTSD in survivors produced different DNA patterns in their children, specifically on the gene that governs how the body manages stress. What this means in plain terms is that a grandfather's trauma in war may have physically altered the stress chemistry his son was born with. And that son, your potential father figure, brought that altered stress baseline into his own parenting. So you aren't just psychologically carrying your father's influence. In some places, you may be carrying it in your biology. Now, I want to be careful here because this isn't fatalism. This isn't a lesson of you're stuck with whatever you inherited. The research actually points in a much more hopeful direction than that, and we'll get to that shortly. But it helps to understand the full weight of what we're talking about because a lot of men are trying to change things in themselves without really grasping how deep the roots go. And here's where the research really takes a mind-blowing twist. A lot of men who had cold or absent fathers often make a conscious decision to be completely different. They want to be more present, more affectionate, more involved, and that's so true, in particular for modern-day fathers, and that intention is real and it matters. But research on what psychologists call overcompensation in parenting shows that simply running in the opposite direction from your father creates its own set of problems. Anxiety-driven over-involvement, difficulty watching your child struggle or fail, a kind of hypervigilance that actually makes it harder to be calm and attuned. So this is all important, but simply being the opposite of your dad isn't the same as having processed him. Because if you don't understand the specific moments when this goes out, you're going to miss the part that's actually most useful. Attachment theory tells us that becoming a caregiver reactivates the internal working models you formed in your childhood, and not just in general, but it happens specifically under stress. The moment a father loses his temper, feels helpless, or hits that wall, in that moment his nervous system doesn't improvise. It runs a program that was downloaded in childhood, often before he even had words for it. Men regularly report hearing their father's exact tone come out of their own mouth, feeling their father's posture in their own body, saying something they swore they'd never say. And it happens without planning, and often against everything they consciously intended. That's not weakness, that's implicit memory firing. And here's the bit I think fathers of sons specifically need to hear, because it's quite specific and maybe a bit uncomfortable. The Cambridge study found that fathers with unresolved trauma in their attachment history showed more controlling behavior, but this effect was stronger with sons than with daughters. Why? A father looks at his son and, without realizing it, projects his own childhood self onto him, and that triggers the same control dynamics his own father used on him. So the same unresolved history that might make a father warm and gentle with a daughter can make him harsher with a son. Not because he loves his son less, but because his son activates something much older, something he probably doesn't even know is there. And here is why closing the loop on this really matters, because it's not just how you and your child's relationship forms, it's how your child's relationship with others forms too. A landmark study by Philip and Caroline Cowan found that a father's attachment history predicted more variance in a child's externalizing behaviors, aggression, defiance, acting out, than the mother's history did. So when a child is blowing up at school or constantly pushing boundaries at home, the research points towards the father's unresolved emotional history as the more powerful upstream cause. Now, if you're finding this video useful, honestly, the best thing you can do right now is subscribe and drop a comment below telling me which one of these findings hit hardest for you. It genuinely helps this kind of content reach more fathers with their clarity and their intention, and I personally read every single comment. But I want to finish on the part that I think is most important, because everything I've described so far could sound pretty heavy, and I don't want to leave it there. The adult attachment interview, the one from the University of Cambridge, doesn't just measure what happened to you in childhood, it measures how you talk about it. And the researchers found that the single strongest protective factor wasn't whether a man had a good childhood, it was whether he could narrate a different childhood with coherence, without dismissing it or being overwhelmed by it. Men who had painful, absent, or damaged fathers, but could construct a clear and emotionally honest account of that experience, showed parenting quality that was near identical to men who were raised by consistently warm fathers. Psychologists call this earned security, and it's one of the most helpful findings in this development psychology, because it means the past doesn't have to be a life sentence. So here's what I want you to know. Before your child was born, the way you talked about your dad was already predicting your parenting style. Your father's experiences may have shaped your stress chemistry before you took your first breath. The men who try hardest to be the opposite of their fathers can end up recreating the same emotional outcomes through a different mechanism. And the moments you're most likely to become your father are the moments you're most stressed, most helpless, most activated, because that's when the oral program runs. But the researcher says this: the story you can tell about your own father may matter more than what he actually did. Not what happened, but how clearly you can hold it. That's the work. And it's worth doing, not just for you, but for the child who's already being shaped by it, and by you, right now, whether you realize it or not.